Organized education remained relatively rare, and there are few primary sources or accounts of the Roman educational process until the 2nd century AD. Due to the extensive power wielded by the paterfamilias over Roman families, the level and quality of education provided to Roman children varied drastically from family to family. Nevertheless, Roman popular morality came eventually to expect fathers to have their children educated to some extent, and a complete advanced education was expected of any Roman who wished to enter politics. Traditional Roman education was moral and practical. Stories were meant to instill Roman values, mores maiorum. Parents were expected to act as role models, and working parents passed their skills to their children, who might also enter apprenticeships. Young children were attended by a pedagogue, usually a Greek slave or former slave, who kept the child safe, taught self-discipline and public behavior, attended class, and helped with tutoring. Formal education was available only to families who could pay for it. Lack of state support contributed to low literacy. Primary education in reading, writing, and arithmetic might take place at home if parents hired or bought a teacher. Other children attended public schools organized by a schoolmaster, luda magister, paid by parents. Vernae, homeborn slave children, might share in-home or public schooling. Boys and girls received primary education generally from ages 7 to 12, but classes were not segregated by grade or age. Most schools employed corporal punishment. For the socially ambitious, education in Greek as well as Latin was necessary. Schools became more numerous during the empire, increasing educational opportunities. At the age of 14, upper-class males made their rite of passage into adulthood and began to learn leadership roles through mentoring from a senior family member or family friend. Higher education was provided by grammatici or rhetores. The grammaticus or grammarian taught mainly Greek and Latin literature, with history, geography, philosophy, or mathematics treated as explications of the text. With the rise of Augustus, contemporary Latin authors such as Virgil and Livy also became part of the curriculum. The rhetor was a teacher of oratory or public speaking. The art of speaking, ars dicendi, was highly prized, and eloquentia, speaking ability, eloquence, was considered the glue of civilized society. Rhetoric was not so much a body of knowledge, though it required a command of the literary canon, as it was a mode of expression that distinguished those who held social power. The ancient model of rhetorical training, restraint, coolness under pressure, modesty, and good humor, endured into the 18th century as a Western educational ideal. In Latin, illiteratus could mean both unable to read and write and lacking in cultural awareness or sophistication. Higher education promoted career advancement. Urban elites throughout the empire shared a literary culture imbued with Greek educational ideals, paideia. Hellenistic cities sponsored schools of higher learning to express cultural achievement. Young Roman men often went abroad to study rhetoric and philosophy, mostly to Athens. The curriculum in the East was more likely to include music and physical training. On the Hellenistic model, Vespasian endowed chairs of grammar, Latin and Greek rhetoric, and philosophy at Rome, and gave secondary teachers special exemptions from taxes and legal penalties. In the Eastern Empire, Berytus, present-day Beirut, was unusual in offering a Latin education and became famous for its school of Roman law. The cultural movement known as the Second Sophistic, 1st-3rd century AD, promoted the assimilation of Greek and Roman social, educational, and aesthetic values. Literate women ranged from cultured aristocrats to girls trained to be calligraphers and scribes. The ideal woman in Augustan love poetry was educated and well-versed in the arts. Education seems to have been standard for daughters of the senatorial and equestrian orders. An educated wife was an asset for the socially ambitious household. Literature. Literature under Augustus, along with that of the Republic, has been viewed as the golden age of Latin literature, embodying classical ideals. The three most influential classical Latin poets, Virgil, Horace, and Ovid, belong to this period. Virgil's Aeneid was a national epic in the manner of the Homeric epics of Greece. Horace perfected the use of Greek lyric meters in Latin verse. Ovid's erotic poetry was enormously popular, but ran afoul of Augustan morality, contributing to his exile. Ovid's metamorphoses wove together Greco-Roman mythology. His versions of Greek myths became a primary source of later classical mythology, and his work was hugely influential on medieval literature. The early Principate produced satirists such as Persius and Juvenal. The mid-1st through mid-2nd century has conventionally been called the Silver Age of Latin literature. The three leading writers, Seneca, Lucan, and Petronius, committed suicide after incurring Nero's displeasure. Epigrammatist and social observer Martial and the epic poet Statius, whose poetry collection Sylvie influenced Renaissance literature, wrote during the reign of Domitian. Other authors of the Silver Age included Pliny the Elder, author of the Encyclopedic Natural History, his nephew Pliny the Younger, and the historian Tacitus. The principal Latin prose author of the Augustan Age is the historian Livy, whose account of Rome's founding became the most familiar version in modern-era literature. The 12 Caesars by Suetonius is a primary source for imperial biography. Among imperial historians who wrote in Greek are Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Josephus, and Cassius Dio. Other major Greek authors of the empire include the biographer Plutarch, the geographer Strabo, and the rhetorician and satirist Lucian. From the 2nd to the 4th centuries, Christian authors were in active dialogue with the classical tradition. Tertullian was one of the earliest prose authors with a distinctly Christian voice. After the conversion of Constantine, Latin literature was dominated by the Christian perspective. In the late 4th century, Jerome produced the Latin translation of the Bible that became authoritative as the Vulgate. Around that same time, Augustine wrote The City of God Against the Pagans, considered a masterpiece of Western culture. Religion. The Romans thought of themselves as highly religious and attributed their success to their collective piety, pietas, and good relations with the gods, Pax Deorum. The archaic religion believed to have come from the earliest kings of Rome was the foundation of the Mos Maiorum, the way of the ancestors, central to Roman identity. Roman religion was practical and contractual, based on the principle of do ut des, I give that you might give. Religion depended on knowledge and the correct practice of prayer, ritual, and sacrifice, not on faith or dogma, although Latin literature preserves learned speculation on the nature of the divine. For ordinary Romans, religion was a part of daily life. Each home had a household shrine to offer prayers and libations to the family's domestic deities. Neighborhood shrines and sacred places such as springs and groves dotted the city. The Roman calendar was structured around religious observances. As many as 135 days were devoted to religious festivals and games. Ludi. In the wake of the Republic's collapse, state religion adapted to support the new regime. Augustus justified one-man rule with a vast program of religious revivalism and reform. Public vows now were directed at the well-being of the emperor. So-called emperor worship expanded on a grand scale the traditional veneration of the ancestral dead and of the genius, the divine tutelary of every individual. Upon death, an emperor could be made a state divinity, divus, by vote of the Senate. The Roman imperial cult, influenced by the Hellenistic ruler cult, became one of the major ways Rome advertised its presence in the provinces and cultivated shared cultural identity. Cultural precedent in the eastern provinces facilitated a rapid dissemination of imperial cult, extending as far as Najran, in present-day Saudi Arabia. Rejection of the state religion became tantamount to treason. The Romans are known for the great number of deities they honored. As the Romans extended their territories, their general policy was to promote stability among diverse peoples by absorbing local deities and cults rather than eradicating them, building temples that framed local theology within Roman religion. Inscriptions throughout the empire record the side-by-side worship of local and Roman deities, including dedications made by Romans to local gods. By the height of the empire, numerous syncretic or reinterpreted gods were cultivated, among them cults of Cybele, Isis, Epona, and of solar gods such as Mithras and Sol Invictus, found as far north as Roman Britain. Because Romans had never been obligated to cultivate one god or cult only, religious tolerance was not an issue. Mystery religions, which offered initiates salvation in the afterlife, were a matter of personal choice, practiced in addition to one's family rites and public religion. The mysteries, however, involved exclusive oaths and secrecy, which conservative Romans viewed with suspicion as characteristic of magic, conspiracy, conjuratio, and subversive activity. Thus, sporadic and sometimes brutal attempts were made to suppress religionists. In Gaul, the power of the Druids was checked, first by forbidding Roman citizens to belong to the order, and then by banning Druidism altogether. However, Celtic traditions were reinterpreted within the context of imperial theology, and a new Gallo-Roman religion coalesced. Its capital at the Sanctuary of the Three Gauls established precedent for Western cult as a form of Roman provincial identity. The monotheistic rigor of Judaism posed difficulties for Roman policy that led at times to compromise and granting of special exemptions. Tertullian noted that Judaism, unlike Christianity, was considered a religio licita, legitimate religion. The Jewish-Roman wars resulted from political as well as religious conflicts. The siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD led to the sacking of the Second Temple and the dispersal of Jewish political power. Christianity emerged in Roman Judea as a Jewish religious sect in the 1st century and gradually spread out of Jerusalem throughout the empire and beyond. Imperially authorized persecutions were limited and sporadic, with martyrdoms occurring most often under the authority of local officials. Tacitus reports that after the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64, the emperor attempted to deflect blame from himself onto the Christians. A major persecution occurred under the Emperor Domitian, and a persecution in 177 took place at Lugdunum, the Gallo-Roman religious capital. A letter from Pliny the Younger, governor of Bithynia, describes his persecution and executions of Christians. The Decian persecution of 246-251 seriously threatened the Christian church, but ultimately strengthened Christian defiance. Diocletian undertook the most severe persecution of Christians, from 303 to 311. From the 2nd century onward, the Church Fathers condemned the diverse religions practiced throughout the empire as pagan. In the early 4th century, Constantine I became the first emperor to convert to Christianity. He supported the church financially and made laws that favored it, but the new religion was already successful, having moved from less than 50,000 to over 1 million adherents between 150 and 250. Constantine and his successors banned public sacrifice while tolerating other traditional practices. Constantine never engaged in a purge. There were no pagan martyrs during his reign, and people who had not converted to Christianity remained in important positions at court. Julian attempted to revive traditional public sacrifice and Hellenistic religion, but met Christian resistance and lack of popular support. Christians of the 4th century believed the conversion of Constantine showed that Christianity had triumphed over paganism in heaven, and little further action besides such rhetoric was necessary. Thus, their focus shifted towards heresy. According to Peter Brown, in most areas, polytheists were not molested, and apart from a few ugly incidents of local violence, Jewish communities also enjoyed a century of stable, even privileged existence. There were anti-pagan laws, but they were not generally enforced. Through the 6th century, centers of paganism existed in Athens, Gaza, Alexandria, and elsewhere. According to recent Jewish scholarship, toleration of the Jews was maintained under Christian emperors. This did not extend to heretics. Theodosius III made multiple laws and acted against alternate forms of Christianity, and heretics were persecuted and killed by both the government and the church throughout late antiquity. Non-Christians were not persecuted until the 6th century. Rome's original religious hierarchy and ritual influenced Christian forms, and many pre-Christian practices survived in Christian festivals and local traditions. Legacy of the Roman Empire. The legacy of the Roman Empire has been varied and significant. The Roman Empire, built upon the legacy of other cultures, has had long-lasting influence with broad geographical reach on a great range of cultural aspects, including state institutions, law, values, religious beliefs, technological advances, engineering, and language. This legacy survived the demise of the empire, 5th century AD in the West and 15th century AD in the East, and went on to shape other civilizations, a process which continues. Rome was the civitas, reflected in the etymology of the word civilization, and connected with the actual Western civilization on which subsequent cultures built, is the Latin language of ancient Rome. epitomized by the classical Latin used in Latin literature, which evolved during the Middle Ages and remains in use in the Roman Catholic Church as ecclesiastical Latin. Vulgar Latin, the common tongue used for regular social interactions, evolved simultaneously into Romance languages that still exist today, such as Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, and Romanian. Although the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century AD, the Eastern Roman Empire continued until its conquest by the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century AD and cemented the Greek language in many parts of the Eastern Mediterranean, even after the early Muslim conquests of the 7th century AD. Roman paganism was largely displaced by Roman Catholic Christianity after the 4th century AD and the Christian conversion of Roman Emperor Constantine the 306-337 AD. The Christian faith of the late Roman Empire continued to evolve during the Middle Ages and remains a major facet of the religion and the psyche of the modern Western world. Several states claim to be the Roman Empire's successor. The Holy Roman Empire was established in 800 when Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Roman Emperor. The Russian Tsardom, as inheritor of the Byzantine Empire's Orthodox Christian tradition, counted itself the Third Rome, Constantinople having been the second, in accordance with the concept of translatio imperii. The last Eastern Roman titular, Andreas Palaiologos, sold the title of Emperor of Constantinople to Charles VIII of France. Upon Charles's death, Palaiologos reclaimed the title, and on his death granted it to Ferdinand and Isabella and their successors, who never used it. When the Ottomans, who based their state on the Byzantine model, took Constantinople in 1453, Mehmed II established his capital there and claimed to sit on the throne of the Roman Empire. He even launched an invasion of Otranto with the purpose of reuniting the empire, which was aborted by his death. In the medieval West, Roman came to mean the Church and the Catholic Pope. The Greek form Romaioi remained attached to the Greek-speaking Christian population of the Byzantine Empire and is still used by Greeks. The Roman Empire's control of the Italian peninsula influenced Italian nationalism and the unification of Italy, Risorgimento, in 1861. In the United States, the founders were educated in the classical tradition and used classical models for landmarks in Washington, D.C. The founders saw Athenian democracy and Roman republicanism as models for the mixed constitution, but regarded the emperor as a figure of tyranny. Rome may have fallen, but its shadow still lingers in our laws, our languages, and even our cities. The empire is gone, but its story is far from over. Because history doesn't end, it echoes. So, if you want to uncover more of the secrets, battles, and legends that shaped our world, subscribe, because this is just the beginning of the journey. The Roman Empire rose from legend, ruled the world with unmatched power, and collapsed in fire and chaos. Yet in so many ways, Rome never truly died. It lives on in our laws, our languages, our cities, and in every empire that came after. But Rome's fall wasn't the end. It was the beginning of 1,000 new stories. From the rise of Byzantium to the birth of medieval kingdoms, the echoes of Rome continued to shape history. If you want to discover those echoes, the secrets, and the legends that shaped our world, don't stop here. Click on one of the videos on screen now and join me as we uncover more of history's greatest empires, battles, and mysteries. Rome ruled the world, and then it collapsed. But here's the secret. Rome never truly died. Its laws, its roads, even its dreams still live in our world today. And that's just one empire's story. If you want to know what happened after Rome fell, how new powers rose from the ashes, click the video right here. Trust me, history only gets wilder from here. The Roman Empire rose from myth, conquered the known world, and collapsed in fire. But its legacy never vanished. It still lives in our laws, languages, and cities. Rome may have fallen, but its story is eternal. If you want to continue this journey through history's greatest empires, click on the next video now and step deeper into the echoes of Rome. Rome's fall wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. After the empire crumbled, new powers rose from its ashes, shaping kingdoms, faiths, and wars that still echo today. But who truly inherited Rome's power? And what secrets still hide in the ruins of history? The answers are waiting in the next video. The mystery continues. Subscribe. Rome went from nothing to ruling the world to falling apart in chaos. But here's the thing. Rome's fall didn't end history, it just made it crazier. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe so you're here for the next empire's rise and fall. Thank you for watching, stay cool, stay positive, and see you in our next video.